All right.
Okay, so we had technical difficulties, so we're just wrapping up Musk. So Musk, asshole, nobody needs $1 trillion, nobody needs $1 billion, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, I think. Oh my God, there might have been one small thing that I was going to say about. Okay, the fact. Okay, so I said something about he didn't earn it.
Right.
Nobody earns $1 billion. Nobody's labor is worth that much. I don't care what he does. He can go away tomorrow, and all the jobs and everything else and anything else could have been established or processed through some other way. If they would have gave that money to NASA to begin with, we'd probably be further along with anything that he's done. I'm sure they'll say, well, he put that rocket on the ground. That was NASA technology and Russian technology. That was not Musk. And that could have been accomplished either way. The United States of America put a man on the moon in less than 8 years with technology that was less than you having a calculator in the 80s. Like,
yeah.
You know, so don't give me that shit that he did something that the U.S. government couldn't have done. We built an atom bomb in 2 fucking years. Your parents are like, oh,
right, yeah. They carried on with that,
yeah. So they're scientists over there. So you're gonna tell me that the U.S. government can't do things efficiently and get shit done? Bullshit. Look at that fucking shit. Look what they did in the 30s, the Hoover Dam, all those public works. Musk hasn't even come close to achieving any of that shit in fucking 20-something years. So fuck Musk, he's an asshole. And away we go.
Anyways, episode 33, part 2, part 3. Part 3.
This is the last one.
Last one, though.
Yeah.
Juneteenth. Let's brief word about what it is, and then some words about what it isn't, and that's about it. So what it is. A lot of people think that, you know, slavery ended with Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation, and that was it, that was done.
Right.
The reality, which a lot of people, especially if you weren't from Texas, don't know until recently, is Juneteenth, which is a date almost 2 years after that, when slaves, at least in Texas, were officially informed of the end of the war and, you know, the official end of slavery, etc. And so it is the real end to the legalization of, or the legalized status of slavehood.
At least on paper.
At least on paper. Yes.
They just turn them into like sharecroppers and shit.
And part of why I brought it up is in hearing about and reading things like Howard Zinn and the real history of the United States, you start to realize that, you know, we've got this myth about American greatness and oh, the Revolutionary War, and oh, we were so oppressed by the Brits and whatnot. And if you really start to look at it, yeah, the upper class in America were kind of had a tiff going on with the Brits, but for the average American, things really basically didn't change at all when we first.
For some, it made it worse.
And for a lot, it may have made it worse. Whereas, by comparison, when women finally got the right to vote and the right to get a credit card in the 70s and the right to not be treated as chattel in the 20,000, and anyways, that's women. And then for minorities with Juneteenth and these kind of things, these are actual human rights that mean something.
Sure. And you're touching on something here about what this country, right? 1776, right? So you have this revolution. What were the beefs with? How did they dupe a bunch of poor farmers to fight this battle for them, right? And they were talking about taxation without representation and freedom and emancipation from the British reign and all these other things and no kings, right? But some of the other major factors were they were not supposed to go past the Mississippi, and they were having things with, you know, as far as dealing with the Native Americans here in the United States, and they wanted free reign to go out west as far as they wanted, and they were kind of putting the shackles on them to do that, right? So they had a beef with that with the king. They had a beef with the king, you know, obviously with the taxes. They don't want to get paid taxes. They want people to pay them taxes, not to pay taxes over.
Right, but again, the average person, they didn't necessarily pay less taxes. They just paid different taxes to different people.
This is actually making it worse, right? This is making it worse for the indigenous people of this country that lived here at the time, right? After 1776, because now they could just went ballistic and just started massacring without restraint. No restraint. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened regardless, but this just like took the gloves off, right? Look what happens after that. So then the mass migration to the West and what the atrocities that occurred. So you had that, right? And then you had slavery was an issue. They wanted to maintain slavery while Europe was transitioning into capitalism, right? Because under capitalism, we talked about this in the first episode, you don't have to, well, you know, there was the people who were saying this is not dignified. You had some of the French Enlightenists, you know, who were saying these things, like this is just not dignified as a human to treat other humans this way. But then the capitalists were also saying, well, look, it's much better to dangle a carrot in front of somebody to get them to work than to force them. They're actually going to work harder if you promise them something than if you beat them. So this was just another way to create slavery with a carrot rather than a whip. So,
but it was still a step forward. I mean, let's not.
It's still a step forward, but now you have a carrot instead of a whip. Yeah, but it's still bullshit. It's still exploitation. They still exploit. They put people in factories for 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, children, put them in coal mines, no safety. People died all the time. They were dead by 30 from, you know, black lung. There was, you know, stories of, you know, what's that one where the dam broke because they wouldn't fix it and the whole town went under because they were such assholes. Look, the atrocities that were committed by the industrialists in the 1800s are just unbelievable brutality. And, you know, this myth about American exception, like if you lived in the United States of America in the 1800s and you weren't rich, this place is a fucking shithole. And for almost everybody that was living here, you're a farmer out in the elements trying to make ends meet. You could die from getting cut, you know. And you got Indians, you know, or let's call them Native Americans. And then you got, you know, and you're encroaching on their land, so they're pissed.
And like you said, there's no real medicine now, so
right. And there's no real law going on. You know, it's the Wild West, and these Native Americans are pissy because you're fucking with them and their livelihoods for good reason. They're pissy at you. And so that's if you're moving out west, and if you're living in the cities, it's atrocious filth, and you're working at a factory. So yeah, this, like you're saying, like this was not better for the vast majority of people. It was better for the bourgeois, for the capitalists, you know, and for the ones who could creep into the capital class, you know, the very small few. So yes, it did provide a ladder for some people who never had a ladder to begin with, right?
Right.
But it wasn't until FDR, and we said this a million times, and I just keep repeating it in case somebody hasn't watched this, that he started, you know, he said, no, break up these banks, let's break up these monopolies, let's break up this stuff up so we can get rid of this what we've created is a new oligarch. We've created a new feudal system, so we need to break this apart. We need to save some of these lands because we're going to encroach on all these lands. So he started all that stuff, land preservation and all the national parks, right? And then his cousin, years later, this is when it switched from the Republicans to the Democrats, became the Democratic Socialists, and that's what saved us from fully blown fascism that most of the world was going towards. Whether you called it communism or fascism, it was still totalitarianism. Most of the world was going totalitarianism in one shape or form, either through fascism or communism, which is the same thing when you really break it apart, or they were doing it through going democratic socialist. And we went democratic socialist like most of the countries of Europe, you know, and Northern Europe. So luckily, you know,
right,
because it did springboards for some things that happened later on that were good. But yeah, I think it's good to point that out.
Right. Anyways, what the other thing that I was going to talk about with Juneteenth is that it kind of came on a lot of people's radar about, give or take, about 4 years ago when it was made an official holiday under Biden.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. A lot of people still think that it's a national holiday, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not. And the reason why I say that is, at that time, all states and most major employers were treating it like, you know, the 4th of July and all these other things where you were given the day off and it was treated like a national holiday. Trump comes in his second term and basically, he didn't completely dismantle it, but he basically said, oh, it's a states' rights decision whether to recognize it as a federal holiday. I know that sounds weird, but that's literally what he did.
Yeah, that's how bizarre he is.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things where if you think that the guy isn't racist to that alone, I mean, you should sum it up with like, I mean, how...
Well, in Texas, it looks like it's being observed because it's about Texas.
I mean, it literally, for the first time ever, you had MLK Day and Juneteenth being recognized as national holidays in the sense, like as I said, and now they're not because of what Trump has done to reverse things.
Right. He wants to go back to 1776.
Yeah.
This is why I laugh about any conservative.
There's not a whole lot else
When
to say.
you say
but
I'm a
that's the
conservative,
points
what
that I
are you
meant to make,
conserving?
yeah.
What are you conserving? Well, I'm just a fiscal conservative. What part of fiscal? What part?
Because if you actually cared about reining in monopolies, which eventually just destroy everything, then you couldn't be a conservative because they're not. They keep loosening those restrictions. Not
right. Like you're so full of shit.
Yeah.
So, anyways, how do you want to?
Anyways, there are so many minute issues that are pissing me off with Juneteenth, but here's what it boils down to. There are people who make it sound like it's something that's not a big deal or it shouldn't be celebrated or whatever. And to all you guys, fuck you. And then there's everybody who's arguing minutia, but basically says, yes, this is something that was a big deal and it should be recognized. And yeah, we might quibble about this historical piece of it, but it's a big deal. That's where we fall. It's a big deal. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I mean, if there's some of these things that should be celebrated, this is one of them.
Right.
One of the very few things that's happened in this country, this is one of the things that should be celebrated.